This is an agency with tremendous power, tremendous extra-constitutional power, which is a problem, as evidenced by this governmental standoff, along with untold, insidious attacks on our liberty. Joining me now from Washington, D.C., Director of Investigations and Research at Judicial Watch, Chris Farrell. Chris, the very nature of the CFPB tells me that there is a problem. It is autocratic. It is not answerable to the United States Congress, number one, and it's really questionable the way this thing was set up, exactly who it is answerable to. In other words, this thing kind of operates in a vacuum at the same time wielding tremendous authority not only over the American consumers, but also over certain industries in this country.
It's an unconstitutional abomination. It's a bureau, it's an agency that does not receive its funding, nor does it have oversight requirements with the House of Representatives, which in and of itself is mind-boggling, right?
Right.
The House finances, they make all the appropriations for the United States government, except for this sort of nightmare creation of Elizabeth Warren. So at its very root, at its foundation, it's unconstitutional. It has the enormous powers that you mentioned in the introduction. And on top of that, it essentially turns banks and other financial institutions into public utilities. It is a nightmare organization, and frankly, the Trump administration should have defunded and ordered its closure upon being sworn into office.
Maybe that's coming, because clearly something needs to be done. This agency is a real problem. It's a real blight, but of course, it was created through Dodd-Frank, and the president has also taken aim at certain portions of Dodd-Frank, and it's going to take, literally, from what I understand, an act of Congress to undo this thing. Yeah, of course, as you mentioned, it wields incredible power over certain industries. For example, if you're a builder, there's a requirement through the CFPB that you have an auditor, if you have a loan of a certain level through a bank, that you have to pay the auditor's salary while this auditor is overseeing your... It's absolutely insane. But Judicial Watch, you folks, have uncovered some documents, and these documents pertain to how the CFPB paid private companies to gain personal sensitive financial information with no due process, no warrant, no Bill of Rights to protect the consumer. This is consumer information. Millions and millions of Americans affected by this unilateral decision from the CFPB.
Right. The CFPB operates without a single vote from any congressman or senator. I mean, it is its own little oddball creation of Elizabeth Warren. And in the case of what you just mentioned with respect to collecting data, it is a data vacuum. CFPB would make the NSA blush, frankly. If people are frantic over metadata being collected from their cell phones, how about all your financial information being vacuumed up by CFPB, and you don't even know about it? They're looking at banking records, credit card transactions, you name it, they suck it up out of the air. And from every one of these financial credit agencies like Experian and the rest of them.
Right.
And so this agency, they love big data. That's what they're going for. And you have to ask yourself, for what? What are they doing with this information, and why? This is all self-appointed, self-authorized, self-enabling and enacting, and there's virtually no supervision. There's no court order. There's no judge reviewing what they're doing. They're doing it all by themselves, and they have zero real authority to have done it.
I want to talk to you about something called, as we drill down in what this agency is doing, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. This agency ostensibly is designed to protect consumers, when in reality, you look at this and you read the wording, this is just a slice of it. It actually violates our rights, an attack on the Fourth Amendment. So this says, in part, the panel shall include 5 million consumers and joint borrowers, co-signers, and authorized users. This is a panel, a chunk of Americans' lives they're talking about here. So starkly, but this is what they're talking about. The initial panel shall contain 10 years of historical data on a quarterly basis. The initial sample shall be drawn from current records and historical data appended for that same sample, as well as additional samples during the intervening years to make the combined sample representative at each point in time. So what we're talking about here is 5 million Americans over a span of 10 years quarterly. You're talking somewhere in the neighborhood, by my count, from a constitutional perspective, 200 million violations of the Fourth Amendment. Does this thing still operate? Do we know if it's still operating with this impunity of the United States Constitution?
It does, and that's just the problem. You made reference in the beginning of your statement about this indefinite period, unlimited contract. That means that the data firms, the firms that are collecting all this credit information and providing it to CFPB, it's unending, it's unlimited. They go on and on and on. They are literally tracking every credit card swipe of this population of persons that they're tracking. So you go out and whether you buy a quart of milk or you buy a firearm, they're tracking that. And then in addition to that, they have the special provision, and they're wonderfully, or I guess frighteningly vague about sharing the information, quote, with other agencies, close quote, whatever that means. Mm-hmm. And so this rogue operation, who granted them this authority? For the FBI to get a tiny sliver, a fraction of that sort of information for law enforcement purposes, it requires them issuing a national security letter. Not these guys. They're wholesaling it with millions of Americans, hundreds of millions of transactions over a 10-year period, and no one ever approved it. No judge, no court, Congress. They're just doing it on their own because they want to.
And so here we have a Republican-controlled Congress, House of Representatives, United States Senate, and we have a Republican president. This is a window of opportunity to drive a stake through the heart of this agency, which we just simply do not need. It's a burden on our society. It's a burden on our business. It's a violation of our constitutional rights on the consumer side of things. There are adequate protections out there, adequate laws that currently exist, and the Republicans are blowing the opportunity because I don't believe they have the guts during the election cycle of 2018, during the election year of 2018. I don't believe they have the guts to erase this agency, which is completely unnecessary. It is running unaccountable, and it is completely unconstitutional. Chris, thank you.